Whether you're picking and grinning or just grinning, grab a drink, pull up a seat. It's time for Roots Music Rambler. Turn it up. So, did I hear this correctly? Lucia is at Lollapalooza right now?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How'd she score that?
Well, see, what had happened was, so she and her best friend were planning to get tickets when they first went on sale, but of course, as teenagers do, they procrastinated and ended up not being able to buy them. So Lucia's dad, unbeknownst to me, and I mean, he didn't have to tell me ahead of time, but entered some sort of raffle that was being, I think he said the Chicago Park District or maybe our local park district, I don't know, was hosting this raffle. So he entered it, and the prize were 2 4-day passes to Lollapalooza.
Wow.
And he won. So Lucia and Karen, her friend, got to go, anyway. So, today's day one of Lollapalooza. By the time this airs, it'll be long over. But the big draw for them today was none other than Chappell Roan.
Of course.
So she was all excited for that. And I get it. I'm just like, I'm acting like I'm annoyed or jealous. I'm really not, because that's way too many people.
Yeah.
But I just chuckle a little bit on the inside because, I'm on a gatekeep right now. I went to Lollapalooza back when it first was born, it wasn't, I didn't go the first year. And this is when it was a traveling festival. It wasn't permanently in Chicago. So, the second year though, I remember I went twice. It was here in Chicago, and then later in the summer it was at another venue in Wisconsin, which, it's not that long of a drive for us anyway. But so I was in like OG Lollapalooza reveler. And like the year I went, there was Soundgarden, Pearl Jam.
Nice.
Yeah, so she's at Lollapalooza, and I'm trying not to freak out because there are so many people and it is in the middle of Chicago.
Sure.
But she's smart. I know she makes good decisions. It's just the other people that I'm worried about.
Well, I mean, she's, you said Chappell Roan, but I mean, on this night to when we're recording this, the first night when she's there, Lizzie McAlpine, Megan Thee Stallion, Hosier. That's at Kesha. There's a really cool lineup there. Tomorrow, though, the second night of this is Lefe, Renee Rapp. I mean, dial that in. SZA. That's some good stuff. That's some good stuff, right? The Killers are on Saturday.
And as we're recording,
yeah,
she just sent a message saying that they're leaving. So I guess they're not interested in seeing anybody else tonight.
Wow. Okay. Well,
yeah.
I guess that's up to them. But I mean, I'm not into all of these artists or all of this kind of music, but it looks like a fun event. So
yeah,
good for her. My daughter just got back from the Governor's School for the Arts. She was gone for 3 weeks, which is the longest she's ever been gone from home.
Oh man!
And when we dropped her off, it was at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, which is about an hour from where we live. And when we dropped her off, Katie's one of these people who is fine unless she doesn't know anyone. And if she feels alone, she kind of gets anxious. So as we were leaving, like she had that puppy dog look on her face, like, I'm scared. I don't want to do this. Don't leave me here. So I went and picked her. We went and picked her up 3 weeks later, obviously, just this last weekend. And she didn't want to leave. And I just went out to dinner with her tonight. And she said, "Can you take me back? I don't want to be home anymore. I want to be back at Governor's School for the Arts with my friends." So it's a kind of a coming of age moment, I guess, for Katie to kind of get to that point where she realizes that there's a next step out there and she doesn't have to be as scared of it. So,
right.
She studied drama for 3 weeks from 3 very, very seasoned, directors / drama professors, teachers.
Okay.
And they did a showcase performance for the last day. It was fantastic. She met a bunch of new people that are, her extended theater family now, I guess. And so she had a blast there. So our daughters are experiencing cool things this summer, which is nice.
Yes.
I just put 4 new tires on my car because eventually it's going to be Katie's. So I'm starting to freak out about all that stuff too. But
Oh, yeah. She's
whatever.
16 already, right?
She is. She gets the car in November when she gets her license, and then
Oh,
I get a
shit.
new car, which is awesome. But
Oh, all right. Well, that's
I'm
not so bad.
I'm still like dreading every moment of my daughter growing up and leaving home. Anyway, welcome to Roots Music Rambler. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
And we're rambling on through the stories behind the music we love.
And today on the show, now you've heard Jason talk a few times about venturing back home to interview Larry and Cheryl Webster. Okay, they are the folks that hosted the Friday night Pickin and Grinnin sessions that Falls attended when he was a wee lad. So he's told us before that the Websters are really the roots of his love for roots music. So he did venture back home and did just that. And they are our guests today.
I am super excited to share this interview with everyone. I promise this isn't just a self-indulgent thing here from 2 people I know back home. Larry and Cheryl Webster are in many ways linchpins in the community of traditional mountain and bluegrass musicians in Kentucky and beyond. They not only had any number of well-known artists come through the events they've booked, but also who show up at their house to play and learn from them and others when they're here in the bluegrass or in Eastern Kentucky. We've talked about Jesse Wells, the professor who plays fiddle and guitars for Tyler Childers. He's in that Webster network of musicians. JT Cure, who plays bass for Chris Stapleton, almost always stops by the Webster house when he's home in Elkhorn City. They live in the same town. And we told you before how their granddaughter Ella is the current fiddle player for Cole Chaney, who's about to hit the road for a ton of dates in the fall around the country. So I was able to beg and borrow a little bit of the Webster household time. I was invited. Well, I kind of invited myself to their house and stopped by to chat with Larry and Cheryl a couple of weeks ago when I was home. And I think you're just really in for a treat today. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. And you've told me, even off air, a lot about them. But I don't exactly remember what we talked about on the show and what we didn't.
Right.
So if you would just remind our listeners how you know them, because I know in the interview you refer to some things that no one would really understand unless they know the full background.
True. Okay, so for context, Larry and Cheryl Webster, I guess I should start with my mother moved with me, or moved, and then I moved with her, I guess, when I was 4 years old to Pikeville, Kentucky. Larry has been a long time practicing attorney there, and he and my mother and some other business investor venture people started a competing newspaper to the local newspaper in Pikeville, Kentucky in roughly 1979, 1980, somewhere right in there. I was about 7 or 8 when this happened. And so Larry and my mom were business partners. Larry also and his wife Cheryl also are musicians. They have their own sort of mountain bluegrass band. And when Pikeville's little annual festival, all these little small towns across the country have these little festivals every once a year. Ours is called Hillbilly Days. And it started out as a fundraiser for Shriners Children's Hospital. It's now in its umpteenth year, whatever it is. It's been around since the late 70s. And Larry and Cheryl were called upon early on and have since, with a couple of exceptions, been the main stage music programmers for the gazebo or the stage in the city park during this festival. And what Larry and Cheryl do is they bring who they think are the best and brightest mountain traditional banjo, fiddle, roots, bluegrass musicians to play at Hillbilly Days. It's kind of an honor for people to be invited there. And so in addition to being plugged into the mountain community, Larry and Cheryl used to have their band and anybody who wanted to come over on Friday nights at their house to have a little Pickin and Grinnin session. They would sit around and, drink and smoke and cuss and tell stories and play songs and play their instruments. And my mom would go and I would have to go with her. But Larry and Cheryl had 2 kids, Scott and Mickey, my age. Mickey was a year older. Scott was maybe 3 years older. And so I would run around the house with them, but I was always there listening to this music. So that's where the roots of my love of mountain traditional bluegrass country music comes from, is Larry and Cheryl Webster. So when we started this podcast, I kept thinking, I have to go talk to them. I have to interview them, not just because of the personal connection to my love of music, but because they are really the glue that keeps a lot of these mountain musicians together, and they have a real big impact on the music world. Larry's written several songs that have been recorded by a handful of artists over the years. They're, folk, mountain, traditional songs. But he doesn't necessarily record. He doesn't have albums of his own, but he writes songs and whatnot. Larry's been a practicing attorney, as I mentioned, in Pike County, Kentucky, for a long time. For those who might be in and around Kentucky or know something a little bit about it, Larry is a very progressive but conservative politically. He's run for governor a couple of times to kind of shake up the ticket a little bit. He's also a longtime newspaper columnist. And I can actually give Larry quite a bit of credit for one of my first ventures into writing was writing a newspaper column for the same newspaper. And I modeled my column as a humor column after his column, and kind of playfully poked fun at him and his column in mine. But that kind of established me as kind of the sort of younger, poor man's sillier version of Larry Webster as a columnist. So we've got all these like things that sort of cross paths and overlap with one another. And Larry and Cheryl have always been a father and mother figure to me, sort of tangentially to my parents. And so this is it's fun for me personally, but I really hope you guys and gals out there listen for the music connections, because they talk about some things that give them a lot more credibility than I probably ever could. So there you go.
Well, that all sounds wonderful. And it's clear, just listening to you talk about it, how much of an impact they've had on your life, that extends beyond the music. Like you even said you credit Larry with your journalism endeavors, the beginning of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's wonderful. We all should have people like that in our lives who inspire us and encourage us. And I think it's great.
Yeah.
And the interview is pretty funny.
Yeah. Larry's column, I think if I were to describe his personality and his newspaper column, it's political satire, tongue in cheek. He's he has a very sardonic wit, if you will. He is whip smart and absolutely hysterical to talk to. And so I think you'll get a little bit out of this. But he's been known to say a few things that you kind of look at him and go, did you really just say that? And he says a couple of those in the interview too. So it's bear with us. He's fun.
Yes.
Right when we sat down to record the interview, he was putting on a flannel shirt, and he said, I'm just putting this on because it's a little chilly in here. And Cheryl, immediately was like, I just turned the air up. And he's like, don't bicker with me, woman. Don't take it personal. I'm just cold. Like they're just this cute little mountain couple that are just yelling at each other. They're just funny. And it was cute to be back in the Webster household for a few hours. So
yeah,
they actually played at my mom and stepdad's wedding. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So fun times. Anyway.
Excellent.
There you go.
Well, we also have another, I guess, segment to this show. We're going to do our normal Pickin the Grinnin segment, share our picks for whose music is making us grin as an homage to the Websters. And so those are Pickin the Grinnin selections. They might be new artists, might be old, but they will definitely be good.
However, before we kick it all off, our friend Amy Bizzari has a book out that was so good we actually wanted to do an entire episode with her. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties that were so bad we had to kind of scrap most of the recording. Sometimes these things happen. They were unforeseen. We didn't realize it until after the fact. But we still wanted to share some of that interview and more about the book with you.
Yes. So the book by Amy Bizzari is called The Best Hits on the Blues Highway, Nashville to New Orleans on Route 61. So Amy, I've kind of known of her for a while now through my travel blogging network. And we've crossed paths before, but she probably didn't remember me, and that's okay. But so we have a mutual friend who posted something on Facebook about Amy's new book coming out. And when I saw the title, I mean, I didn't even need to read anything further. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect book for, to kind of go along with Roots Music Rambler. And so I reached out. Actually, I think you reached out, Jason. We talked about it, and then you sent her an email, and we got it set up. And she was so excited to talk with us and to record um, the episode. And I am just like, I'm really, really bummed that it didn't work out. That the interview, the file was not where we need it to be. But we are going to share a little bit about or from that interview from the time that we talked with her in this episode. Um, so yeah, Amy, she lives in Chicago and she spent like, I think a summer, is that what she said?
Yeah.
Down in Mississippi. She got enrolled in a program at a school down there, and she lived down there. And if you remember, I took a trip of my own back in April, drove from Chicago down to New Orleans, and it kind of, I was on Route 61 for a little bit, and I kind of followed the same route that she did. So yeah, this book, the topic and the inclusion of the travel element is what really spoke to me.
So we asked her to tell us how the book came about and more about the writing of it. So here's Amy Bazzari.
I've always had a passion for music. And before this, I wrote a guide to Route 66, which, of course, the legendary Mother Road, Route 66. I curated 100 sites that you need to visit from Chicago to LA on Route 66. And I did that because I drove Route 66 and I perused other guidebooks, and all of them had thousands and thousands of places you could stop at. Well, I just wanted to know the essential stops that were the coolest, most interesting and fascinating places. And so I came up with a curated list of the top 100 places. And I drove Route 66 in a minivan with my two kids one summer, had a wonderful time. Then Route 61 came to mind, and I thought, oh my gosh, just on a trip to Memphis. I love Memphis. Took my daughter to Memphis on a little girls' getaway, and we stayed at Graceland and, visited Stax Records. We did all the cool Memphis music stops. And I thought, oh my gosh, Route 61, I need to drive this. And, there's so much to see. And I was accepted from Delta State University, which is in Cleveland, Mississippi, for a summer seminar. I'm also a teacher. I'm a Chicago Public High School teacher. And this was a teaching seminar about Southern culture and history in the Deep South on the Delta. I was so excited to do that. And while I was there, I extended my stay and I had a little blue Jeep that I rented, and I explored all the roads, byways, coming off of Route 61 and all of those just cool music history sites. And I wrote a book. I curated my favorite places on that route because I felt like, everybody thinks about Route 66. People come from all around the world to drive Route 66. But if you love music, Route 61 is where it's at. I mean, the entire history of American music unfolds on Route 61.
All right. Again, the book is called The Best Hits on the Blues Highway, Nashville to New Orleans on Route 61. And you can find the links to the book on our website in the show notes. The book is on Amazon, on her website, and, all the places you would normally find books.
It really is a great book. Karen and I actually used it a bit when we did our vacation planning last month that included some stops in Nashville. We didn't go to Memphis or New Orleans, though, so we've got another vacation now to plan because of this book. So do go get it. It's really, really good stuff. And if you're looking for a fun music-based road trip vacation from Nashville to New Orleans or any of those stops in between, you got to take this book with you. It's fantastic. Got great ideas, places to eat, places to get some history. Lots of fun stuff. I'm actually really, serious. Like my sister lives in Memphis. So at some point, Karen and I are going to get in the car and we're going to do the Nashville to Memphis. And then I'm at least going to go as far south as Clarksdale because I got to go down there and listen to some good old blues in Clarksdale. But we may end up in New Orleans as well. So good book. And it's going to inspire us to go on vacation and do something of that. So I hope you all do it too. And we certainly do apologize to all of you and to Amy for the technical difficulties of the original interview. Sometimes that happens. We're constantly tweaking our process here to prevent it, but sometimes it just happens. We'll do the interview, we'll hang up, we'll, go to bed, get up the next day. I'll open up the files and they'll be corrupt or there'll be something wrong with it. And it's just sometimes jumping through hoops to re-record an interview with someone. So we thought we've got enough of what she told us that we could do a couple clips, talk a little bit about the book, and do it some level of justice here. So we apologize for the technical difficulties, but hopefully you got a little bit from Amy there and you'll go out and get this book. We are sipping on a bourbon and I am out. So we're going to take a quick break for a refill. Take a moment, if you will, to listen to more about the awesome sponsors that help make the show happen, including Musk Ox Flannels. When we come back, you'll get to know the roots of not just my love of roots music, but the linchpins to many an artist that has come out of the mountains of Appalachia. And keep an ear out for an interesting tidbit about Tyler Childers' dogs. We're taking a mosey over to Elkhorn City, Kentucky with Larry and Cheryl Webster. That's next, and this is Roots Music Rambler. Hey, gang, I was not a flannel guy until I found Musk Ox flannels. Now, I don't want to wear anything else. Well, I mean, pants, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so Musk Ox is a premium flannel shirt that comes in various colors and styles, but also all season or heavy. So they have different weights and thicknesses. They even have sizes that fit big boys like me. Now, Frank, I hear the ladies like the flannel look. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
So one Musk Ox flannels customer actually said they are buttery soft, but built like a tank. I resemble that remark, especially when I'm wearing my Musk Ox flannels. They also, by the way, give $10 of every $100 order to support wildlife conservation. So you're doing some good for the earth and the animals on it with every purchase. Visit gomuskox.com/rambler, browse the collection and get you some buttery soft, built like a tank premium flannels. Make sure you use the code RAMBLER, all caps, and get the discount on your order. That's gomuskox.com/rambler. Use the code RAMBLER, buttery soft, yo. That might be my new hashtag.
Used to rise in the morning to watch the rebirth of the sun, to walk in peace in the wildwood with your love, your dog, and your gun. Your love, your dog, and your gun. That 20-ton mistress you've taken has raped and tortured the land, and the earth you loved you've forsaken to plunder with the greed of your hand. Oh, to plunder with the greed of your hand.
So welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. That song is called 20-Ton Mistress from a folk artist named Guy Carawan, but it was written by Larry Webster, who is half of the duo that is our guest today on the show. And as you know by now, Falls made the trip home a few weeks ago to talk to the couple that he credits with his love of roots music. So, Jason, tell us more about what we heard and what we are about to listen to.
So, yeah, the song was written by Larry Webster. He's written a bunch of songs over the years, and we've picked out a few of them that we could find. There's not a whole lot out there on the Spotifys and whatnot that you can find, but we found a few. And Guy Carawan's a folk artist that, got to know Larry and looked at a couple of his songs and used several of them over the years. In fact, I think he actually has one album that the album is actually titled after one of Larry's songs. So, just great that exists out there. And so to kind of set the stage here, what you're about to hear is I literally went to Larry and Cheryl's house, sat down around their kitchen island, and I just sat the phone in the middle of the thing, hit record, and we just had a conversation. So we're going to take breaks in the middle of it like we normally do, but there's not a whole lot of formality here. This is me and two people I've known all my life just chatting about music and all that good stuff. So we'll pause in the midst for quick commercial breaks and all that good stuff. But this is my conversation with Larry and Cheryl Webster. The people who listen to the podcast, I've told this story probably a dozen times. They're probably tired of hearing it because the podcast is called Roots Music Rambler, and it's about exploring artists and where the roots of their love of music comes from. Not just roots music, but their roots. And it's more than just what musical artists impacted you. It's like, well, where were you raised and how did the place impact you and how did your family and your education and all that kind of stuff. And I've told them that my roots for my music, my love of music, because I'm not talented at all. I can't play anything. I can barely sing. And,
Really?
and that's a stretch. But my roots come from the living room of Larry and Cheryl Webster. Because when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, Friday nights at your all's house was Pickin and Grinnin, and I'd come and run around with Scott and Mickey Todd and whoever else was there. But I would always sit and listen to y'all play. I guess this is more of a thank you.
Well, thank you. Those Friday nights are basically a burden on Cheryl because she couldn't keep her house very clean. Because you know how it was. That place was full of smokers and things, and every week is the same things. But we kind of willed ourselves into the old-time music scene by doing that, forced ourselves into it, inserted ourselves. Other people have imposter syndrome. We are imposters. Okay. But we, as you know, we had some of the best, simply by being where we were, we had some of the best old-time and bluegrass traditional musicians in the country.
Yeah.
Through getting to know all these people, we're able to expose our progeny to that a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Go for it.
I'll start with, I grew up in Crane Nest, Kentucky, which is Knox County.
Okay.
I did not learn until I was an adult that my little community was a Cherokee village.
Okay.
My mother hummed songs when she did housework. She did Carter family songs. Hank Williams was the big star then, so I got to hear Hank Williams. And the most scandalous thing that ever happened was Jerry Lee Lewis married his 12-year-old cousin, according to my mother. My mother's maiden name is Scott. She grew up across the creek from her uncle Green Scott, who is my grandfather's brother. They all came from Harlan County. My cousin Darrell Scott
Oh, I know who he is.
wrote You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive, which is about mine and his great-grandparents.
Wow.
Green Scott, his grandfather, married Mary Bergen from Harlan County, who was a great musician. She really brought the music to that side of the family. So all of her children sang, and my mother grew up with a mother who was sick most of her life. And her oldest brother, Cecil, and her oldest sister, Hazel, were taken to Berea to go to high school because there was no high school there in Knox County at the time. When Cecil got to Berea, he decided to hop a train, which he did. He hoboed for the next at least 15 years.
Wow.
Nobody approved of his lifestyle,
Of course.
but both sets of families could not wait for him to return because while he was out hoboing, he picked up all the new songs. And he brought all the music back.
Oh, wow.
He played a guitar, and I grew up hearing it. I just grew up hearing it and loved it.
Yeah.
Then I met Larry, who was totally into the folk scene at the time.
When was this?
About 1967 or 8, 68.
Okay. So hippie generation.
Yeah, of course, hippiness come to Kentucky a little bit later than other places. But Back in Lexington in the late 60s, they had some, it was the folk era, and they had some unbelievably good folk music shows on there that played the raw, old, ragged, really mountain stuff. It wasn't just the Kingston Trio and the Peter, Paul, and Mary faux folk.
Faux folk. Okay.
Faux folk.
I haven't heard that one yet. All right.
Real folk. And that's where I really realized the power of the old traditional music. The folk musics were smooth, but they didn't have power. But that when I found the origins of that, that's where I got attracted to it.
One thing we both had in common, we grew up listening to WCKY Cincinnati 1, Ohio.
Okay.
Our families listened to the music there. And Larry had a family that had records. Oh, Larry had TV. He got to see some stuff on. My family got a TV after I left.
Okay.
Larry
had TV?
Larry had TV, and they, I think I'm correct, and they watched the Lawrence Welk show together whenever Lawrence Welk came on. And Larry also had a stepfather of Italian descent in Ohio, and they got to go up there in the summer where I think he was exposed to even more music.
So, Larry, where did you grow up?
I grew up on the Kentucky River, close to Frankfort, about 20 miles up from the mouth of the Kentucky River, a place called Owen County. Mm-hmm. Rugged tobacco country. After we moved to eastern Kentucky, and everybody in Owen County thought we'd moved to the end of the earth, all the people here started going back there to deer hunt.
Yeah.
To get away from it all. That's the way life is.
So were you in Onkton?
No, I went to school there.
He grew up in Grass.
I was 9 miles out.
Okay.
It was quite a interesting little place. There was a person in Owen County who was not a Baptist.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
One.
And they frowned on music, let alone good music.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
For the people listening, I say Onkton. It's Owenton, but if you're from there, you say Onkton.
Well, the Rose brothers from Owen County made a little money, and they went out to Las Vegas one time to one of them shows, and the comedian came around, kind of joking with the audience.
Yeah.
He asked one of the Rose brothers, "Where are you from?" And Rose said, "Lusby's Mill, Kentucky." And the comedian left to go trick with somebody else. His brother said, "Looked like you could have told him Owenton ain't nobody knows where Lusby's Mill is."
Yeah, that sounds about right. Oh my goodness, that's good. So, Larry, when did you start playing?
I started playing in about 1975.
Oh.
Chuck Huffman was like 17 years old and started giving guitar lessons 30 minutes at a time, and I would go down to his house and watch him eat cheeseburgers while I tried to play the guitar. But I learned chords there. But we started having those gatherings on Friday night, and people would come there, just really fine musicians, not well known other than locally, but just capable of playing. There's an old guy named Kentucky Slim, you may remember him, big tall guy that just as smooth and Gurney Adkins was an old fiddler, and those guys would tell me I could play better than I could and encourage me and say, "Oh, that's good," and teach me stuff. And I love them, never forget them. It meant more to me than about anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised that you didn't start playing until later, because the whole folk scene thing was happening in the 60s. If you didn't start learning to play till 75 or so, that surprises me because you play a bunch of different instruments now.
Yeah, I don't play anything very well. I can play a mandolin and a banjo and a guitar, and a dulcimer. But I was raised in a non-musical. When I went to high school, there was only one kid in high school that played the guitar. And it was not it just wasn't part of our culture. And I became aware of the music, old roots music, when I was back in those days, but I always wanted to be a part of it. And that's probably the main reason I tended to want to move and live in Eastern Kentucky.
So you came here for the music?
Basically, more or less
we had job offers.
I knew the music so well. And if you know people's music, you know the people. And I thought I knew these mountain people from the music, and I did.
Wow.
I was not I knew them very well by their music.
I had a major influence in high school. The Phipps family, who were imitation Carters and sounded just like them.
Okay.
Truline Phipps was in my high school class. We had assemblies in high school where her family performed for us, and this was a regular thing.
Wow.
So, in addition to my mother humming those tunes, singing, I was exposed to all of those songs and absolutely loved it.
You're the first person that I ever knew. My mother told me one of Cheryl's great gifts musically is that she can harmonize really, really well.
Yes, I've had other people tell me that.
Yeah. You have a beautiful voice in and of itself, but that you fill harmonies really well. Did you learn that intentionally, or where'd that come from?
Well, I can hear it.
Yeah.
I had gone to Cowan Creek. I started taking Ella and Elizabeth there when they were 5 and 7. And I would always take the singing classes because they were such a joy.
Yeah.
And I've had various harmony classes, and there'll be people in there who want to make it into a science of physics. Mm-hmm. And I have the ability to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't know where that comes from.
Sure. It's a gift.
Now, I don't consider my voice a good singing voice, but my sister was offered a scholarship to the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. She really has a better singing voice, but she didn't go.
Well, there's singing voices that are appropriate for certain things, and I mean, I've only ever heard you sing bluegrass and mountain and gospel, and it's perfect for that. So, y'all sang at my mom and stepdad's wedding.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I'm like, wait a minute, I've got pictures of y'all.
We've run many a good start.
Well, speaking of ruining many a good start, let's get to the fun part, because I know that the people listening to the podcast will love to hear this. I'm not going to go into detail, but I will offer up my heartfelt apologies for being a little shit. And probably bringing more stress upon the two of you than anyone other than your own children. When I was a little kid, I know I was quite the runt.
I only remember one episode.
All right, take it away.
What did you whitewash?
Oh, you talking about the fence?
Yes.
So, this is how I remember it, or this is how it was told to me. I barely remember it. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And Larry hired me to paint your all's fence. And I think I was painting it white or silver or something. And I did that for about 10 minutes and then didn't want to do it, and saw 2 kids walking down the alley. And I said, hey, won't y'all finish painting this fence? Larry will pay you for it. And I took off.
I remember something happening. I think some things were painted that weren't supposed to be, and Larry being upset. It
was a plastic portable radio, and Jason took it out to listen to it while he painted. And when I got it back, it was painted.
Oh, was that what it was?
Same color as the fence.
Well, I didn't see you as a little bother, honey.
No.
I just remember that. I remember Larry being upset over something.
No,
being painted or...
You were fairly normal among kids of that era. No more annoying than most.
Oh, well, I appreciate you saying that. You might be being modest, but
Well, your obvious potential was always there. You bright kid and creative, and nobody had any doubt about where you were going to go.
Yeah, because,
jail.
Oh, no. No, Sarah's one of the smartest people I ever met, and Gary was no slouch, so.
Yeah, they did me right. That's for sure. That's for sure. I am certainly glad they didn't strangle me back in the day. And what did I tell you? Those two are a treasure. We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, Larry and Cheryl will talk more about their granddaughter, Ella, who is quite the accomplished musician now. So don't go away. This is Roots Music Rambler. Hey, Ramblers, I have experienced a revolution in sound in my house, and you can too. The revolution is driven by Sonos. The Sonos wireless music system lets you play any song in any room, control it all with the Sonos app on your phone or tablet. Sonos has all the connections to give you millions of songs and stations, including connecting to your iTunes, your Spotify, Pandora, and more. Get a wireless Sonos player and hear the sound quality difference. Then get one for all the rooms in your house where you listen, but might be out of reach of the stereo or Bluetooth speaker you normally use. So I've got one in my bedroom and bathroom for when I get ready in the morning. I've got one in the kitchen and living room for when I'm hanging out with friends. And then down here in the office den for when I'm working or setting up for another episode of the show. I happen to like the Sonos Move, which is one of the speaker models. I can put it out on my patio for cookouts. It's a weather-resistant design, has an 11-hour battery life, so I don't need to plug it in out there when I have people over for cookouts or tailgates or whatever. And I can play music on all or just a few of the speakers, so I never lose my jams going from room to room. Try the Move and hear the difference, then hook up all the rooms in your house for an excellent listening experience while you move around cleaning or dancing or whatever you do in the privacy of your own home. Listen to Roots Music Rambler on it, for God's sakes. It makes me sound even more handsome. Go to rootsmusic.link/Sonos, S-O-N-O-S, rootsmusic.link/Sonos. That'll take you right to the Sonos Move speaker page to purchase. I highly recommend it, and you'll love how much better your music and podcasts sound. Go to rootsmusic.link/Sonos. That's rootsmusic.link/Sonos. Welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. We are in the middle of my conversation with mountain music connectors and curators, Larry and Cheryl Webster. The song you just heard is called High on a Mountain. It was another recorded song that was written by Larry Webster. It's performed there by the local Honeys with Ella Webster, his granddaughter, on fiddle. She's Larry and Cheryl's granddaughter. We'll talk about that in this next segment. Here's more of my conversation with Larry and Cheryl Webster. What's it like to now be, having this, long history of loving music and playing music? What's it like to see your granddaughter being a professional musician traveling around the world with a band?
Well, she keeps playing. These declarations have to be reduced in their weight because she's our grandchild. Everything they say about her, they don't. You can discount it.
Okay.
But she keeps playing in better and better circles. Night before last, she accompanied Peter Rowan.
Mm-hmm.
And she keeps playing in better and better circles, and we go to hear her in better and better circles. And we've never been anywhere yet that she wasn't better than the rest of them.
Wow.
When she was young, She heard it at our house. Her other grandfather's family sang a lot. Mm-hmm. So when she was around those people, she heard it there. We saw her potential early, you just know. And I kept telling her mother, I started asking all of our musician friends in the Lexington area, who are the best fiddle teachers down here? And there was no doubt it was Amy and Daniel Carwile. And I was told there's a waiting list to get in their classes. Mm-hmm. So I kept telling Ella's mother, you need to contact them, get her in fiddle class. She didn't see the urgency in this or something. She never did. So I took Ella and her sister Elizabeth to Harrodsburg for St. Patrick's Day show. And Amy and Daniel Carwile were there. That's the first time I ever met them. So I proceed to give Amy my daughter-in-law's phone number and said, will you please contact her? Mm-hmm. And upon that, I think Ella started classes with them when she was still 5 when she started playing.
Wow.
But they start out with Amy, and I would go down there. Anytime Amy wanted Ella to attend some extracurricular thing, I got called to take her. Amy would she just gets it. I just can't believe it. She just gets it.
Yeah.
And that she was taught by the Suzuki method, which I'm sure you're familiar with, because I know you have children that are talented singers or musicians. And she auditioned to go to Scapa and got in, started there. So then for several years, we attended Scapa orchestra concerts, Lafayette orchestra concerts, Central Kentucky youth concerts, which she mastered all of that. But her love was always the old time. Because I started taking them to Cowan Creek. I think she was 7 or getting ready to turn 7, and Elizabeth was. Now Elizabeth is a very talented musician also.
Okay.
But being 2 years younger than Ella, she didn't want to compete with her.
Yeah.
She can play the band. So she started kind of playing the banjo more than the fiddle to be different.
Yeah.
But she would get frustrated because Ella was better, and we would try to explain that's because Ella's been doing it 2 years more than you have.
Exactly.
So finally she discovered that she could dance, and Ella couldn't as well as she did.
There
so
you
she
go.
started dancing.
But
Larry can still hum any tune to her, and she can play it.
There you go. Proud grandparents, aren't they? Don't worry, they talk about their grandsons too. That's coming up in the next segment, along with some conversations about their impact on mountain musicians, Larry's political and professional career, and more. Don't go away. This is Roots Music Rambler.
I bid farewell to the pits of hell, the dust in my mouth and eyes, the cold too low and the top on hole, and a section boss that I despise. Damn it all, let the mountain fall, let the gas from its belly rise, let the coal abound underneath the ground, got me a job outside.
All right, welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. The song you just heard was another one written by Larry Webster. It was recorded by Nate Polly, a traditional mountain music artist from Whitesburg, Kentucky, which is not far from Pike County.
That's right. Not far, just right to the south of it, over Jenkins. You go over Jenkins and Whitesburg, they're down there in southeastern Kentucky. By God. By the way, if you turn the music up too loud in that part of the country, you're not dancing, you're dancing. So just keep that in mind. We are listening to my recent conversation with bluegrass and traditional mountain music connectors and curators Larry and Cheryl Webster. We jump back in and hear more now about how and why they are such important linchpins in the mountain music community. Take me back. You guys, I believe, have been responsible for the music at Hillbilly Days since its inception. Is that correct?
At the inception of Hillbilly Days, I missed a couple of years of doing it, and then I started doing the music. At that time, there was only one venue during Hillbilly Days. That was the City Park, and I took that over. And within 4 or 5 years after that, they were doing other stages. But the place we've always been has been for acoustic music and bluegrass and old time, and with a special emphasis on this, I tried to bring in each year for one performance in their lifetime the best old time band I could find in the country.
Oh, wow.
And made it a prestigious thing, sort of like the Mark Twain Award. I would call these people and tell them, I'm inviting you to play here because I think you're the best right now.
Wow.
So when they play Hillbilly Days once, and it's a great experience on its own for musicians, they can put it on their case and be proud they've done that.
Yeah.
And then it's also been an avenue for us to get to know our heroes. When I call the best old time band in the country to come to Pikeville to play, it's a good way to get to know them.
That's good. You got to
stay up.
So we have this national network of people, and Ella's kind of tapped into some of that also.
Yeah. So over the years, who are the best pickers you've played with or best pickers you've seen?
Well, either at Hillbilly Days or otherwise, we've had we played with the very best, the old Highwood String Band bunch, Walt Koken, Matt Benford, all those guys. Of course, Cheryl's cousin Darrell Scott, who's a world famous songwriter and instrumentalist. We got to play some with him at reunions and things like that. But we've had musical association with the legends like Ralph Stanley and Curly Ray Klein and the Goins, Ray Goins, and people like that. And we used to have those Friday night parties. 10 miles down the road from us was a what my dad would call a roadhouse, a club, where you bring your own bottle in, and they would have some musician there either on their way up or on their way down. And oftentimes when that place was shut down, the entertainer would come over to our house. So sometimes on Friday night at 1 o'clock, we'd get somebody like T.G. Shepherd or somebody like that.
Wow. I wasn't there those nights.
Well, kind of ironically, I feel like the very best musicians we've been exposed to came from Pike County.
Yeah.
Jimmy McCowan, Paul David Smith, and we were very lucky to know Snake Chapman just prior to him passing away. Mm-hmm. Jimmy McCowan took a special interest in teaching Ella old-time stuff.
Wow.
I don't know if do I have this vague memory that you might have gone to some bluegrass festivals with us?
Probably did. I know Mom and Gary dragged me to a couple of places. I'm thankful for it now. I didn't like it back then. But I know I've seen Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys a couple times. I saw John Prine a bunch of times. And that was just being, hey, we're going here this weekend, and I had to go. And I'm sure you guys were there.
Well, the Outdoor Plumbing Company was a bluegrass band from over near Williamson. And Jimmy played professional bluegrass for a long time. And then in his later days, he came back to his roots. And Paul David Smith is just a legend. Ella also spent a lot of time around him. He would be at our house. And we always we had a New Year's, our Friday nights turned into a New Year's Day party when at least I got a little older and more feeble. So, some of the very best would come. They usually had a gig somewhere New Year's Eve, but by New Year's Day afternoon, they could show up at our house.
Nice. I'm interested, Larry, that you said when you all started these little gatherings, it was you all were imposters and you were trying to insert yourself. Right. I mean, fast forward 30 or 40 years, you guys are kind of the linchpin in a nice network of these musicians. And
in a network sense, certainly not a musical sense. I was the least talented singer and banjo player that ever tried to public perform. And I had to make up for that by repertoire. Having studied this music since I was 14 years old, I'd heard every really, really cool old obscure song in the world. So we get up and do one after another of them, and people soon quit paying attention to the fact that this guy can't play for shit. Can't sing either.
Well, you can't say you're the worst because, I mean, hell, I've done karaoke, so.
He is not the worst.
I'm not the worst, but I'm not good enough to be playing in public, but I never stopped to be. Let me put it this way, Jason. The love of music does not demand perfection. It waits to be surprised by it.
I love that. That's a great quote.
We started going to Davis and Elkins for old-time lessons. And while there, Larry had a Mennonite preacher finally get through to him how he really should play the old-time banjo.
Really?
And no order preacher in the clothes. That's great.
What did he make you change, or what did he tell you to change?
Well, the fundamental stroke on a banjo, old-time clawhammer banjo, is a simple process, but it's like most simple processes. If you do it wrong, you can do something wrong and it don't sound too bad. But if you do it right, it usually sounds a little better.
Oh, okay.
But my problem was, I've been a 70-hour-a-week practicing lawyer that whole time. I have never in my life sat down and practiced a musical instrument. Now, you'll think about that. I have played with others, but I have never sat down and said, I'm going to run through this 8 or 10 times till I learn. And that's one reason I never did learn very good.
Huh, so you just played?
Just played for the fun of it. And now, it used to be I played with others who weren't that good, and it was at least less uncomfortable. Now I'm almost afraid to play anywhere because all these people we know are so good. I'm not about it.
Awesome. I was fortunate at Davis and Elkins to take a class from Patsy Montana.
Okay.
And Peggy Seeger.
Wow.
I think you probably know both of those people.
I know the names, absolutely. In fact, Pete Seeger's name's come up recently on the show a couple of times. We had a folk group from New Jersey called Jackson Pines. And these kids are, 23, 24 years old. And the feather in their cap of their career is they got to play with Pete Seeger.
Wow.
Well, Peggy is Pete's sister.
Yeah.
And married somebody from England.
Yeah.
But she taught one year, and it was just amazing.
I bet.
And I got to sing with the Florida Mass Choir director.
Nice.
That was quite an experience. That's a really good place to go learn.
That's awesome. I know I emailed you this, but I don't know how often you check your email. And I don't know if you translated this to Larry, but a couple of months ago, we had Cy Khan on the show.
Really?
We did. And the only reason I know who Cy Khan is because he came here to play for your birthday one year.
Did he remember it?
He did. He absolutely did. I asked him about it because I said, I've seen him play twice live. Uh-huh. Once was at your birthday, and I wasn't there very long because it wasn't a child-friendly event, I don't think. And then I went to see him play at the Carter family fold that they do with Mom and Gary one year.
That's great.
But I had him on the show, and I said, I want to see if you remember this story. You were brought to Pikeville, Kentucky to play for Larry Webster's birthday one year. And he said, "Oh, I wasn't brought to Pikeville, Kentucky. I was smuggled in to Pikeville."
Yeah. Well, what was funny, my friend said, "Come with us. We're going to the airport 2 hours away." Didn't know why.
Yeah.
And it was my birthday. We're on the way down there. I would just about get drunk in the car. So we get down there, Con, and here I am about tipsy. But now, speaking of which, see, back in the early 70s, Con had spent a season or two in Eastern Kentucky in the strikes and things. And he wrote his greatest stuff during that time and recorded it locally and published it. His influence on me as a person, as a songwriter, 90% of my songwriting influence. And now, when you talk about me as a musician, it'll be totally in songwriting. Mm-hmm. It won't be in performance. There's not even a record of us probably recording.
Yes, there
Maybe
is.
A few stray ones of people, but no formal recording in the studio. But Con, and he, in fact, you're probably aware, but his present influence across young roots musician in Eastern Kentucky is just enormous. We can get together and everybody in the room can sing a different Con song. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, we recently have been kicking around an idea of having a Con festival somewhere here as a fundraiser for something and trying to get him back and bringing in all the roots musicians, folk musicians, old-time musicians in the area to perform. But hooray for Con. There'll never... Kentucky's mighty lucky to have him here for a while. That's for sure.
I think he would be down for the festival, the tribute or whatever. He was excited about he did something for his 80th birthday, which was in April, and he did some sort of event or virtual concert to raise money for something.
Where's he live now?
I think he's down in Asheville, North Carolina, somewhere in that area.
That's where those people usually end up.
Yeah. He's still around, still kicking, and, still tells great stories. And, he was great to have on the show.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll have to make sure. I'll resend you all the links so you can listen to it because he was a treat. And he definitely remembered coming here for your birthday.
Yeah, well, Apple Shop has been a wonderful thing to keep all this good root music going also.
That's true. Do you guys pay attention to, obviously with Ella now and being the fiddle player for Cole Chaney and touring around, I'm sure you're exposed to more of it than maybe you had been over the years, but do you guys keep up with any of the current like Americana, country, bluegrass, other performers that are in the charts trying to sell records, all that stuff?
Perhaps somewhat. There's some radio broadcasts of that stuff that we can get on 10 o'clock on Saturday night, stuff like that,
He's still up there on the roof with the antenna,
right?
Trying to get a station.
Trying to pouring water at the foot of the electric pole to get the batteries charged or something like that.
Well, I prefer to turn the TV on Saturday night and listen to rebroadcast of shows that weren't really Opry shows. They're not sponsored by the Opry, but it was all those performers.
See, Cheryl missed the early barn dance type shows, the early country music shows where you had square dancing and people with their hankies, the cowboy hats, and so she missed all that. I was exposed to that. So now, late in life, her biggest thrill is to get on there and hear somebody like Farron Young, or those guys.
That's awesome. I actually picked up a Farron Young album the other day. I've gotten back into record collecting.
Well, I turned on him. See, he back at 25, 30 years ago when I hated police more than I do now. His only venue, Farron Young and the Deputies.
Yeah.
And he played, everywhere he played was for, what they call the police organization? The
Fraternal Order of Police? Yeah.
FOP banquets.
Yeah.
You ever if you want to be bored to death, go to a policeman's dance and hear them guns clanging around. And there's old Farron Young up there drunk trying to sing to them laws. And I decided I turned on him.
Okay.
Those days, all those guys, every one of them tried to sound as much like Hank Williams as they could. And some of them were able to do it better than others.
Yeah. Isn't that the thing? Everybody's trying to imitate somebody else.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Every now and then you get a unique voice that kind of pops through.
People are usually able to distinguish me from Chris Stapleton in a song.
A little bit.
By lucky guesses.
Speaking of Chris Stapleton, we're in Elkhorn City, the home of his bass player, right?
JT Cure.
JT Cure.
JT, we're surprised. We got 2 signs at the edge of town.
I saw
one
it.
of them says JT Cure, bass player for Chris Stapleton. And that's before he mounted to much other than that. And then he got him a Grammy for helping write a song, so we put up another sign. we got room for more.
He dropped by to see us. Larry wasn't. It was right after Thanksgiving this past year. Larry was gone, so I had him, that long-haired hippie boy, all to myself. I cannot believe the change in his style of hair and whatever. We were fortunate. We have developed some really good friends in Vermont as a result of the woman taking a banjo class with Larry at Davis and Elkins. And when their son had his bar mitzvah, the Clack Mountain String Band, which had JT, you know who was in it, went up and played for it. So we got to know them real well. Jesse, you want to hear something really funny? You know, Jesse now plays for Tyler Childers.
Yeah, Jesse Wells. Yeah.
Yeah, and recently somebody gave Tyler Childers 2 dogs, and they already were named, and their names were Larry and Cheryl.
I didn't know their names. I knew they got dogs.
And Jesse was like, "Oh my God, you cannot change their names. I know Larry and Cheryl."
Were they named after you, or was that coincidence?
We figure that's probably from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Ah, okay.
But we don't know. I don't know who gave him the dogs, but
Wow.
he has 2 dogs named Larry and Cheryl, and he kept their names because Jesse insisted on it. So we went recently to Lexington to the Green Lantern for Ella's boyfriend's show. He's a drummer. Mm-hmm. He's a very talented musician. He's from the Headhunter family.
Okay.
And he had this loud rock and roll show. And that's how I found out about these dogs. This guy shows up, one of the people in Tyler's band, and somebody was saying, "Oh, this is Larry and Cheryl." And he goes, "Oh my God." Now I have met him before, but now I know Larry and Cheryl.
That's amazing. I didn't know the dogs were named that, but that's fantastic. And it's great that Jesse was able to communicate that story and let Tyler know.
Yes, and I went to college with Chris's mother.
Stapleton's mom?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And, you know, we used to write letters all the time. One of my friends found a letter that Carol had written to her that said, Chris has gone to Nashville. And what, did you remember?
He thinks he can make a living playing music.
She just recently found that letter. And I got to know Chris's dad real well when I worked as an extension agent because he worked at the power company.
Right.
So we had that connection to Chris was always backwards and shy and
Sure.
And his mom, you know, he was so smart. But his dad encouraged it the whole time.
He's done well for himself.
Yes, I love his voice.
It's fantastic.
Larry and I, when we were dating, we used to go out to the Holiday Inn North and listen to J.D. Crowe
Yep.
and Doyle Lawson
Yeah.
and
That whole crew came through there. The Holiday Inn North was the happening place back then, wasn't it?
Yes, and we were there, got to hear all that. And a few years ago, it was one of the last shows Ralph Stanley did over here at his home place. They practically had to carry him onto the stage. And we took Ellen Elizabeth to this.
Wow.
And I knew he wasn't going to live very long, and I said, when he passes, you will hear it. This will be national news. And Elizabeth goes, is he famous like Lady Gaga?
Sort of.
And it wasn't any, shortly thereafter he passed, and she sent me a text saying, you were right.
Yeah.
But the other funniest thing that happened over there, Doyle Lawson pulls in his big bus, and he has all these sequins on, and he just stood out like a sore thumb. And he walked down through there, and I looked at him, and I said, you're a sight for sore eyes or something. And I thought Elizabeth was going to die. She's always terrified that I was going to start clogging or... And she said, Mimmer, do you know him? You can't talk to him like that. Of course, he had a big grin.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners out there, I think what these stories can sort of put some foundation of proof to is that Eastern Kentucky is a small place, and everybody knows everybody, especially in the tight circles like the music community or other communities. And you guys have close connections to a lot of people who have come out of here and have been successful. That's fun.
I think Larry should be given some credit for Snake Chapman becoming nationally known. Larry, you need to tell him about that.
Well, these people may not know who Snake Chapman is. You've talked about a lot of things that you assume people know. Snake Chapman's
I'm teaching them.
One of the better fiddlers in the nation. The folklorists and we call them revivalists, the people, their big prize is to go find an old fiddler that nobody's ever talked to before and get his tunes. And there's this local guy named Snake Chapman, very interesting fella. His father lived to be 103 and his grandfather lived to be 107. So in the 70s and 80s in Kentucky, Snake Chapman was playing fiddle music that he learned from somebody who played it in the 1700s.
Holy moly.
And had a barrel of just marvelous old unfamiliar tunes. And he was playing bluegrass here, and nobody quite knew the depth of his roots knowledge. And so one of the old-time bands came in here one day and wanted to know if I knew any old fiddlers he could talk to. So I said, yeah, Snake Chapman. So within a year or two, this guy had recorded him and sent him. So now, if you go to California tonight at a folk gathering or fiddle gathering or old-time music gathering, New York, Brooklyn, you can be assured that they will be playing Snake Chapman tunes because he's one of the last of the old fellas they found. And I was given credit for opening him up to the world on one of his album covers. Snake Chapman, and he came from an area of our county which was rather famous for its successful music. Molly O'Day was from there. Mm-hmm. Her brothers, the Williamsons, and people like Snake Chapman and
Paul David.
Paul David's Blind Ed Haley, some think the best fiddler in American history, used to come up the river to Pikeville and up the Tug River and play with those people. There's several reasons why the local music culture is so rich, and one of them is the fact that we're on the river. The river was the means of traveling, so people could come this far from like down the Ohio River, Catlettsburg, Ashland, up in here. And then the railroad brought in a lot of great musicians, black musicians. And then the coal. Mm-hmm. Coal camps may have been miserable places in some regards, but suddenly all those musicians who had been living out in the country apart from each other were put together at night, play handy for each other.
Mm-hmm.
I attribute the coal camps to a great deal of the success here, because the great musicians would play against one another and try to outdo one another. That's how a lot of them got so good. And their first opportunities to play in groups. So we were lucky. We had the railroad, the river,
And the coal camps.
and the coal camps. And now we got the highways to get them people out there and go play for other people.
Well, the world's a better place for it. So that's good. That's awesome.
Another one of our first dates, we went to Cumberland, Kentucky, and to a Doc Watson concert.
Really? Doc Watson? Wow.
See, we were talking about imposters. There's some woman took daguerreotypes, is that how you say it?
Yep. Daguerreotype, yeah.
Daguerreotypes of old-time musicians of some renown. And she put us and put them on the walls of colleges and stuff for temporary displays, and we ended up on one of those. We was awful proud of that. We were on the wall of Virginia Tech, among other people that everybody had heard of, and there we sat.
Nice. Well, I think y'all deserve to be there.
If somebody else says so, I'll take their word for it.
Okay.
But this music I'm just upset. I listen to old time music all of the time and have a good memory of. I probably learned the words to more songs than anybody in the world of that kind of stuff. That's another benefit for me. I can't sing and play, but I always know the words.
Yeah. That's good.
And I know for sure that we are in the Berea College archives, and we would go down there to festivals in October. And fortunately, when we were recorded down there, Jeff Anderson was in the band, the only trained musician that we ever had in the band, who insisted that we get in tune. And we are there in the archives. I suspect we probably are in Moorhead also. And Ella is learning a lot of songs that Larry wrote. Unfortunately, she's learned them from
Others.
Other people who changed them a bit to make it so they could record them.
Sure.
I told you my songwriting is what I'm the proudest of. My songs are pretty good, my playing it. But Guy Carawan, who was best known for being the folk musician who introduced the song "We Shall Overcome" to the Civil Rights Movement. Guy Carawan, when he died, there was 3 or 4 pages about him in Newsweek magazine. He was a major folk singer, one of Bob Dylan's best friends. Well, he's recorded 2 or 3 of my songs, and one of them a song called "Sparkles and Shines." There's an album. He named an album after it. But to make a long story short, if that's not too late.
You're fine. I got all the time in the world.
When Sing Out magazine, which is 120-year-old, the official Bible of folk music.
Yeah.
When they printed their big article about Guy Carawan, several pages, whenever they do a big feature article on somebody, they have one song that they print the words and the sheet music to. That person has done, and if he's done 8 or 10 albums, and they had my song printed in Sing Out magazine.
Nice.
As the Guy Carawan feature song, and said it's written by a lawyer from Pike.
So last question I want to ask you: which do you prefer when people say who you are? Lawyer from Pikeville, Kentucky. Former politician or reformed politician.
Reformed.
Bluegrass mountain music person. What's your favorite title of all the ones you have?
Lawyer.
Lawyer.
I love being a lawyer. I always have. It was when I was a boy, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and it turned out to be.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought you'd have said that.
Well, I sacrificed a lot to get to this position. I've always represented the poorest people on earth who couldn't pay and didn't make them pay. And as a result of that, Cheryl and I have always had financial struggles. While these other lawyers were buying houses in Lexington, we were, trying to catch up on our house payments here. But now, after 55 years of that, I am representing the fourth generation of those families. And every day somebody comes in and tells me how much their great-grandmother loved me. Wow. And that's worth every minute of it.
That's fantastic.
And with downsizing and moving here, we got rid of all of our financial issues.
There you go. Well, your kids are grown and out of the house. Things change.
Yeah. I want to say, I've talked about my two granddaughters. I need to say something about my two grandsons. Scott's son, Lincoln, has this beautiful, beautiful voice and is just a natural musician. Mm-hmm. Scott and his wife both can sing, and Scott can play all those horns and whatever. When I went to Lincoln's kindergarten graduation, they had this little performance, which was the Lincoln Webster show. He sang dance. But they all are kind of intimidated by Ella. And Ella's little brother will be a freshman this year at Lexington Catholic, and he's taking guitar lessons. It's one of his classes.
Nice. And did the musical branch just not hit Mickey Todd? Is that?
Oh, it often skips a generation.
Okay.
Almost. Did you want to do what your dad did?
What my dad did? You know my dad. Hell no, I didn't want to do what my dad did.
Skipped a generation.
Well, Mickey is totally into Ella's.
Sure. Proud dad.
And I would get these reports when Scott was at Transylvania in a fraternity, and he and Mickey would go to some of the parties, and I would get reports of them singing all these songs that they heard. I'm
not sure if I want to hear Mickey Todd sing, but okay. All right. That's good to know. He's got a little bit of it.
He can sing.
Okay.
and he can hear it. Yeah. He knows.
Well, sure. Well, I mean, he kind of grew up with it in the building, in the blood. Well, I appreciate y'all's time. This is great, and I more than anything, I knew if I was going to be a co-host of a podcast about roots music, and we were going to interview people about their roots, Larry and Cheryl Webster had to be on the damn show. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Now you know all about our grandchildren.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I've reached out to Ella and said, "Hey, I want to have you on the show too." And I'm sure at first she thought this is some weird fan stalker guy, but I said, "No, I know your grandmother calls your father Mickey Todd, so I'm that close."
She is actually somewhat attracted to weird stalker types who.
No, she isn't.
Well, we'll have a great conversation then. I sure did enjoy that. I know you did too. You can find links to a few resources about Larry and Cheryl, including some of the YouTube videos of the Mule Band in our show notes at rootsmusicrambler.com. Don't go away, gang. After the break, we'll have our Pickin the Grinnin segment. Frank and I have some good ones to share with you this week, and we may as well go out with another song written by Larry Webster, right? This is another one from Nate Polly. He's performing Larry Webster's song Under the Hill. This is Roots Music Rambler.
Oh Lord, here I lay in the dark of the mines, dying for Scotia before my time. My good woman's waiting, knows not that she will be raising her babies along without me. 'Cause I'm under the hill in the bowels of the earth, dying at Scotia. Yeah, what is that word? There be any mercy for miners like me? What compensation for my little family?
Welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. How about that, Larry and Cheryl Webster? That was awfully fun, and I hope that it was informative and interesting for all of you as much as it was, self-satisfying for me to get that out of my system. That was almost a little bit of therapy for me, so I appreciate the indulgence.
It was, I really enjoyed listening to it. The banter back and forth, and Larry is a pretty funny guy. And another thing that I noticed is listening to it before we recorded this portion, your accents really was cranked up. You're like, well, gosh darn it, I'm back home and
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk like this.
Oh, hell
And
yeah.
I probably just pissed off the whole of Appalachia with my weak attempt at
No,
the accent.
that's fine. We're proud of our accent, and I've in general worked it out of my vernacular on the day to day because I've been a broadcaster, and I don't live in the mountains anymore.
Right.
I still retain some twang. I know people out there who are not from this part of the country think I sound Southern, and I do, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I'm back home, you go down a half an octave, you talk like you got marbles in your mouth, and hey, mama, let's go get some biscuits over at Toter's now. It's
Oh my goodness.
it comes out now. A lot of times though, I notice when I lapse back into that accent, it's almost I'm doing a voice, I'm doing a character. It's not really me. I'm just sort of playing it up a little bit, but there's a mix. It's a little bit of a gray area because I'm playing it up a little bit and I'm snapping into this accent, but there are certain things that I will say that I just fall right back into old habits. And the one word that you can listen for to know if I've lapsed back is either again or get, because if I'm back home for too long, it's get and again.
Yeah.
And I've learned that when I was in college. I did an internship at a broadcasting company, and I recorded this little voiceover thing for them, and I was reading off a 1-800 number. It's like 1-800-257-1234. Again, the number is 1-800-257-1234. But when I played it back, it was, that's 1-800-257-1234. Again, that's 1-800. It just sounded terrible.
Again.
So, again.
And there's a name for this sort of phenomenon, kids. Do we know what this is called?
Uh-oh.
This is a teaching moment.
All right.
It's called code switching.
Uh-huh.
And I'm guilty of it too. Not guilty, but I do it too. Tom likes to tell people how, as we've talked about before, my family's Italian, that when I get around, especially my siblings and then other people that we grew up with, he just sits back and laughs. He says, because I turn into a completely different person. And just, my mannerisms and the things that I say and the way that I say them. And he's not wrong,
Right.
So yeah, I do the same thing. So I'm not trying to give you shit or anything. I just definitely picked up on it.
Well, it's funny. I am very well aware that I'm doing it. But like I say, after a while, it starts to blur a little bit, and I'm not intending to do it, but I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And my mother used to get really pissed off at me in the summer times because I'd go visit my dad, who lived in Pittsburgh. And as we've talked with Ashley Best before on the show, there's a whole dialect called Pittsburghese. Well, if I'm up in Pittsburgh for 3 or 4 days with my dad, then it's dine time, and I'm going to get a pierogi, and I lapse into the Yinzer talk, and hey Yin's going downtown for about an hour, and I would come home and I would sound like that, and my mother would be furious.
Sure.
But it wouldn't take me long to lapse back in. All right, man, let's go downtown, get us there, go get us some victuals. So it's easy for me to snap in and snap out, but I'm glad you noticed it, because I was in Elkhorn City, Kentucky. I can't not talk like that when I'm down there.
Hey, I ain't mad at you.
In fact, if I were to go into Double Quick in Elkhorn City and talk like I normally talk, they'd look at me funny. They'd be like, you ain't from around here, are you?
You's from out of town, ain't you?
We don't like your kind around here.
Oh my God.
Oh, fun times. All right, we're going off on this Eastern Kentucky thing far too much, but thank you all for the indulgence. I hope this has been at least entertaining for you. It's time for our Pickin the Grinnin segment. This is where Frank and I come up with musicians, artists, albums, music that's making us grin. It's our picks for who you should go and check out, listen to. If they might be old artists, or we might be reminding you to go back and listen to them again. Might be new artists, which we love to help you discover new folks. But either way, they will sure be good. So, Frank, what's your pick for this week?
So my pick this week is a singer, songwriter, musician that I first found out about. Geez, it had to have been 25 years ago or maybe more. But this artist is still active in the music scene, making music, touring locally, not so much internationally. Um, but I have adored her for so long, and she's got a new album coming out in October and a book coming out as well. And the artist I am talking about is Casey Chambers. So Casey is a country singer from Australia. And I remember I first learned about her. I just happened to catch like a quick segment, I think like on CNN or one of those news channels, that was featuring her and her family because if you listen to her music, especially the early stuff, and you didn't know she was Australian, you would think that she's from somewhere probably like Pike County, just that's the sound. Um, but no, she grew up in the Australian outback. And so that was the angle of the story. And this was before like everyone had the internet. So I was like, "Oh my goodness." So I found as much information about Casey that I could at the time. And shortly after that, I found out she was coming to Chicago. So I made it a point to go see her. And every time she came to Chicago after that, I went. And the first time I saw her live, I actually met her after the show. And I was so excited to meet her and like just so um like really moved by her passion and her talent that I'm talking to her and I just started crying.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "This girl probably thinks I'm a big freaking weirdo." And then my friend and I, we kind of became friends with her drummer, and we kept in touch via email, and it was just very like it was really surreal.
Yeah.
And so Casey, her debut album came out in 1999. It's called The Captain. And her voice was like none I'd ever heard before. Um and her dad is in the band with her, and her family actually had their own band. They're called the Dead Ringer Band, and they would play in Australia. um and then Casey went off on her own, but her dad was still in the band, and I think there might have been another family member involved too, but I'm not 100% certain on that. But The Captain, and then her follow-up was called Barricades and Brick Walls, and that was just as amazing as the first one. And she's had so many releases since then, but she has a new album coming out called Backbone that's going to be out on October 4th. And she also is publishing a book that is going to be available on October 1st. And it is called Just Don't Be a Dickhead.
Well, I love her already. Haven't heard any of her music before, but I'm going to dial it up now because I'm listening to the Pickin the Grinnin segment, just like all of you are. So
Sweet.
Casey Chambers. I love
Casey
it. That's
Chambers.
a great pick. Interested to check that out myself. All right. My pick this week is one of the artists that I saw live at Rooster Tail in Madison, Indiana a few weeks ago. It was the 4th of July weekend. And he was actually playing a bit of a homecoming show because he's from Southern Indiana. And so he had a lot of like friends and family there. You could tell he kept pointing out at the crowd at a group of people that were obviously friends or family. So he was really hyped up for the show. And I don't know if it was just that show and he was just like that day, or if he's like this all the time, but he is emerging as one of the most interesting Americana artists out there right now. His name is Steven Wilson Jr. And if you listen to Americana radio, or if you dial up Americana Cuts on Spotify, you've probably heard a song called Cuckoo, which might sound familiar if you go play that. There's another one also called, I think he's got another cut called 1984, I believe, that is, basically an homage to growing up in that era and all that good stuff. I'm sorry, it's not 1984. It's A Year to Be Young, 1994. He's a little bit younger than us. So I was off by a decade. But that was when I was in college, so I identified with it as well. Stephen Wilson Jr., he's really got good stuff. His songs are great. He has a very interesting voice, and a very interesting approach to music. He definitely is one of those people that I would tell you he sounds different than other people. So, when Sierra Farrell came along a couple years ago, we were like, oh, she sounds different. Well, that's this guy. He sounds different. He's not a typical country singer. His songs and his writing are just not something you've heard before. He's an original. So I think he's got a lot of potential to go a long way. And he's very interesting. He just, I think CBS Saturday Morning just did a spot with him.
Oh, cool.
A week or two ago. So he's getting some publicity now too. So check out Stephen Wilson Jr. and get ahead of all your friends on knowing who this guy is, because he's pretty good.
All right. So you got any shows lined up on the horizon?
Yeah. In fact, just today, Karen texted me and said, how do you feel about Christmas shows? And I was like, well, I mean, depends on who it is. But I can get festive. That's fine. And so a few seconds later, she texted me a screenshot. We apparently have some tickets to see Ricky Skaggs' Christmas show here in Louisville in December. So
that'd be nice.
Yeah. And I've never seen him play live as much as, he's from the Eastern Kentucky area. He's obviously was once upon a time with Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys, he and Keith Whitley both. And he's a legend. I mean, he's a Bluegrass Hall of Fame member. He might even be a Country Music Hall of Fame member. I'm not real sure about that, but very successful, popular country career in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Probably one of the greatest mandolin players that ever lived. And so excited to see him. But then, and I'm sure I'll talk more about this on future episodes, but just this week that we're recording this, I saw Charlie Crockett live and got to do a little VIP thing with him. I know we posted about that on our social channels. That was fantastic. Nat Myers opened up for him. He's a Northern Kentucky guy who sounds like a, 80-year-old blues musician. So just amazing. This kid, I mean, he's probably 23, 24 years old, maybe. And he sounds like, Robert Johnson. I mean, he's just really good. So there's, I've been to so many shows. I was actually sitting with my son the other day, and I keep track of all the people that I've seen live.
Of course.
And I went back and counted, and in the last calendar year, not calendar year, in the last 12 months, in the last year since we started this show, and this show is, a big impetus for all of this. Sure. I have now, as of this date, when we're recording this, I have seen 77 different acts.
Cheese and rice.
And well, I shouldn't say different. I've seen 77 acts, because if I've seen someone twice, that counts for 2.
Yeah.
But I have seen 77 separate sets or shows of artists in 12 months. Prior to that, in my entire life, I saw 56. So.
Well, hot diggity dog.
The Roots Music Rambler has lit a fire under me for going back to live shows. And
excellent.
I am enjoying the living shit out of it. And love coming back and reporting, what I see and learn and hear to all of you. So I'm just going to keep doing it. The next up, Karen and I leave tomorrow morning. We are going to Sheffield, Alabama, which is right next door to Muscle Shoals.
Yep.
And we are seeing Patterson Hood solo live. And I'm hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, that maybe, just maybe, Dad may come out to the show.
Right.
It would be great to see David Hood with Patterson, or just in the crowd. I don't even care. I'd walk up and shake his hand. It'd be great. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know who that is, look him up. He's the bass player for the Swampers.
I was just talking about him the other night. I went to an event at a local library branch. There's a record store nearby called Beverly Records. And John from the record store does these like music talks, and he spins vinyl. As he'll tell a little story, then he'll play a song, and it's really neat. And this one was focused on the music of Muscle Shoals. So of course he talked about the Swampers, and then he played the Staple Singer song, I'll Take You There.
Mm-hmm.
And when Mavis is singing, she's like, little David, and so a total nerd, right? I go up and talk to John. I'm like, well, you know the story behind that, right? And he's like, no. So I had to tell him how Mavis Staples was, as she's singing, she's like encouraging David Hood on the bass, so she's like, come on, little David. And now, I mean, I've probably heard that song hundreds of times before I knew that story.
Yep.
But now every time I hear it, it's like, I hear it differently,
Right.
So yeah, that would be a treat to even be in the same room as David Hood.
It'd be fun. I'm looking forward to it. He's I think he's 81 years old.
Yeah.
Or 82 now, maybe. So hopefully I'll get to see him. We'll see. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, not counting on it, but that might help. And then you can pass this on to Lucia. She may appreciate this. On Tuesday of next week, I am accompanying my daughter to Nashville to see one Tate McRae. So I'm going to another show that I would not normally go to, but Katie didn't find a friend who could go with her to Nashville. Yeah. And so Dad gets to go see Tate McRae. I did the same thing this time last year with Gracie Abrams. So
that's right. Yeah.
I got to see her in Nashville as well. So adding that to the acts that I've seen coming up.
I'm almost positive that Lucia is not into Tate McRae. I know who she is, but yeah.
It'll be fun.
Katie will be happy. Right.
It's at the Ascend Amphitheater on the river down in Nashville. So as long as the weather's okay, it'll be a fun night no matter what.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be good.
Cool.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Roots Music Rambler. It is a production of Falls and Partners, copyright 2024. Our theme music is Sheepskin and Beeswax by Gentacorum. Join us online at rootsmusicrambler.com and make sure you mash that subscribe or follow button so you remember to join us for the next hoedown and throwdown. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
And whatever you do, kids, ramble on.